Welcome to the Triathlon Ross YouTube channel. This video is a bit about my first 2 weeks returning back to training / exercise since having a bit of a break post my A race at the end of the year. I'm back in my armchair. I actually haven't sat in this chair for quite a while, and I certainly haven't recorded a video for quite a while from sat down here, so this feels rather fun and familiar. Okay, so I am loosely working towards racing in Oman in the start of February. And as of 2 weeks ago, that would have been a 12-week block of training or time that it gives me to get myself in a relatively race kind of position, if that makes sense. I certainly am not looking to be in tip-top form, but certainly want to be fit enough to do the event. After Kona, I had I think it was 3 weeks of complete off-season. Obviously, we did a bit of traveling and came home and settled into the normal routine, back to work and all those sort of good things. Now, for me, that sort of period is mandatory for athletes to have each year. Some people only take a week, some people 3 weeks, some people a little bit longer. But I think there is a balance there between how much someone has invested in whatever the A race was, how experienced of an athlete they are, and that doesn't necessarily mean how good they are, just how long have they been churning out the years, and somewhere you will find the right time frame for you. It is important for those looking to make year-on-year sort of progression and gains that period of time is not months. The off-season does tend to go quite quickly, or the winter months, once you get going. And ultimately is the time of the year where you can really invest in one or two particular things you want to improve on. And to improve anything, I believe you need sort of 12 to 20 weeks of kind of consistent, targeted sessions or whatever it is to kind of really move the needle. Now, I set myself the rules this year. So this is year 7 of me going through end of season and then looking to race next year as such. And for the first time in those 7 years, I'm relying on my own experience as a coach, as an athlete, what's worked well for me, and what I'm looking to get from my training or exercise in the first few weeks. And I thought it'd be useful to share with yourselves or anybody who's maybe not figured out this kind of time of year yet and what they should or could be doing. Phase 1 of those 12 weeks for me was 2 weeks, and I call it with my athletes for the most part, get moving. There isn't a particular focus straight off the bat, particularly if they've had, upwards of 3-4 weeks off. Your body will decondition itself pretty quickly, and we do tend to abuse our bodies in that time frame with less sleep, some drinking, socializing, all the good things that we like to do. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that, but you do have to acknowledge that when you come back to training, you can't jump straight back in at the paces, powers, even the volume that you were, albeit a month or two ago. So I set myself some rules, and those rules were as follows. For the swim, 5K for the week. Basically 2.5K swims. I had been swimming 4 to 5 times a week between 15 to 20K. I don't envisage going back to that level of volume even next year, but I wanted to give myself 2 sessions that I could focus on some quality, and I'll come on to what I did within those sessions, but I also leave myself some room to grow where maybe I will swim 3 times and maybe I will elongate those swims out slightly and swim closer to 9, 10 to 12K a week. But I certainly need to allow myself to get to that point. And I need to go through that process of feeling unfit in the water, figuring out what my efforts and paces are now and not comparing them to necessarily what they were peak in the season. Now, for me, swim-wise, I don't want to work on big volume or kind of long aerobic sessions just yet. For me, I want to focus on technique. And the main thing I'm focusing on is trying to be as efficient as I can. And by that, I mean I'm working on my distance per stroke. So can I swim my lengths in a certain amount of strokes? So I've done some testing on a stroke rate ramp test, and I've done some 50s at certain paces trying to achieve a certain stroke number. Now that number will differ for different people, but that's effectively what I've aimed at for swimming. And those that I've been back swimming with, I've had to say, I've only got 350 meters left in my week. So I've had to use it constructively, and I've actually found it rather helpful rather than just getting in the pool. I could have easily just done what those around me are doing. I probably would have swam some more, but I would have just banged out lengths up and down with no real purpose. And when you're swimming a relatively low volume, that is not going to see you any progression, or at least I don't think. So that's my swimming. Cycling. Now, cycling traditionally is a discipline that I am slightly stronger at compared to the others, and therefore I haven't really focused or gone at the bike at all. I've done about 3 hours a week. I've done the same session midweek, which is 4 by 10 minutes aerobic, and it's been quite nice because I've been able to compare what it felt like in week 1 and what it felt like in week 2. I actually did it as a bit of a tester week -1 when I set my Zwift bike up. I did a couple of the reps, and I'm already seeing my heart rate and power kind of match up where I would kind of expect. So for me, for the first couple of weeks, it's just about riding the bike. I have done at the weekend a couple of 90-minute to an hour and 40 rides where I've just ridden. I've just done a route on Zwift. I haven't worried about intensity or anything like that yet. And that's it. 3 hours a week is pretty low volume. For myself, obviously distance is skewed because it's on Zwift, but yeah, 100k or so a week is really low compared to the 13 to kind of 18 hours I was doing in August and September. So that's the bike. The run, I have reverted back, and I would encourage people to do this. I have removed pace as a metric or measure of success of the run. I am solely looking at my heart rate and checking in with myself throughout my run. So I'm running 3 times a week. So it's the discipline I'm doing the most of in terms of frequency. I've structured it as 1 easy run, 1 cruise run, and then 1 longish run. Although that was only 1 weekend, last weekend with Bryn. And then this weekend we did a 10-mile canicross race, which effectively was an hour at threshold, but that will be covered in a separate video. But my easy run, back in 2017, 18, 19, we used heart rate a lot, and I don't believe they've changed, as in where my zones sit to some degree. But anything sub 140 heart rate is what I've been looking at. And that still comes in at 5 minute per K, 5:20 per K pace, depending on the terrain, etc. It's been very wet and muddy, so that's fine. I've then done a cruise run, which this is a language or a heart rate that I've not really done a huge amount of. I could argue it is close to a tempo heart rate. So albeit cruise sounds easy to some degree, it is something that is sort of comfortably hard but sustainable. I've done both of those on a treadmill, and all I've done is done a 5-minute warm-up, 30 minutes cruise, 5-minute cool down. And then this week I did 5-minute warm-up, 20 minutes cruise, 3 minutes easy, 10 minutes cruise, 2 minutes easy, 5 minutes cruise. So I added 5 more minutes on, but I didn't do it as a continuous block. So effectively it was 35 minutes of work. And again, by doing it on the treadmill, it suits me on a Friday because of work and lunch and all that kind of stuff. I can kind of see, for example, the pace was basically the same the last couple of weeks, but the heart rate was consistent, if not a little bit lower. And again, it's not showing massive signs of fitness that returns like that, but it's easy, it's repeatable, and I can measure where I'm at. And then this week, as I said, we'll cover it in a video, but we ran 10 miles flat out. And yeah, I set my all-time 60-minute heart rate, which is quite impressive, although heart rate does tend to be higher when you're unfit, and I don't normally do like an hour threshold test in the winter. We will cover that in a separate video. I've also done 3 gym sessions. Now, the plan was to do 4. However, like many people, when you come to do your first gym session after what probably is close to 2 months of little gym work, because you tend to tailor it off heading into the race, my legs and body were kind of very sore after that first session, and therefore I didn't do it on Friday. So I tend to do my gyms on Monday and Fridays. This week I did manage 2 sessions, albeit I didn't go quite as hard or heavy, particularly on Friday, knowing that I was going to do this hard race on Sunday. But it's very important for me to establish that routine, get my body back familiar with lifting some weights, and that is something that will certainly progress over the next 10 weeks and beyond. So set your rules. For me, it was 5k swimming, 2 swims a week, 2 bikes a week with no intensity planned, and 3 runs a week with mixed intensity across the 3. Certainly not, you could do all 3 runs easy, but you certainly shouldn't do hard running in all 3 instances. And then factoring in some gym work and getting your body conditioned again to absorbing the load and being stronger. So that's the off season. For me, that is how I would approach it in the future. It's how I have approached it in previous years. It's not, this isn't novel or new to me necessarily, but it is the conversation that I'm having with a lot of athletes that are transitioning now back into training. Not many have had or have races left this year, and it's important to do this get moving period before you start to dial up the intensity, volume or focus within your sessions to come. The plan now is to do another 2 weeks, and the plan is to add some intensity. I'm going to potentially push my swim volume up a bit. I probably am not going to push it up in terms of a 3rd swim, but I might swim slightly longer if time permits. I'm going to do 1 VO2 session on the bike and push the intensity there and keep the rest aerobic. And I'm going to start introducing threshold reps on the run. And I am going to base that off my heart rate from today, albeit Bryn and I were running together. Effectively, I was running as hard as I could, and it was still useful for me as a data point. Ignore the pace we were running at, but the heart rate is something I can take into sessions and work out where I should be for sort of threshold, LT2, whatever we want to call it, and introduce some harder running. And I'm going to start with 1k reps, probably only 3, and work my way up and see how I go. And definitely get 2 gym sessions in, definitely get that deadlift bar with a bit more weight on it, and go from there. So if you're struggling with your off season, if you have any questions, drop me a comment or a message on Instagram. Happy to answer them and happy to help and assist. That's it. All good, Bryn? Look at him. He's wondering when his afternoon walk is after his 10-mile race.